Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I do videos on creepy and disturbing things. Welcome back to the CCTV disturbing footage iceberg. This is part 2, where we're going to be going over tiers 3, 4, and 5 of an iceberg that I created. There's a lot of important disclaimers for these videos, so if you haven't watched part 1 yet, please go back and do that first. I will put a card here and you can go watch that first, just because there's like a lot of disclaimers at the beginning that's important for this, but I'm not going to repeat them all for this video. But I mean, the biggest, most important one is major trigger warning, because all of this stuff is, as the title implies, super disturbing. Okay, so let's continue where we left off. The next one, which is going to be our first one we're talking about in tier 3 of the iceberg, is Cherish Periwinkle. On June 21st, 2013, Cherish, her 2 younger sisters, and their mother met a man named Donald Smith at the dollar store. He offered to buy the family clothes with a $150 Walmart gift card that he had. They all went with him in his van to Walmart, where they shopped for 2 hours before Donald finally offered to buy them all food at the Walmart's McDonald's. They trusted him at this point, and Donald convinced Cherish to accompany him to the McDonald's to help him get the food for the rest of the family. Instead of getting them all food as he promised, he can be seen on CCTV leading the 8-year-old girl outside where he would abduct her. Her body was found the next morning in a creek behind a church. It is believed that she was bound, raped, and then strangled to death, all in the back of Donald's van before he dumped her body. Turns out, surprise, Donald was a known pedophile and sex offender. He had just been released from jail weeks before he kidnapped Cherish and did this to her. It's so sad though to see her last moments on camera just go with this man that she trusted and who was being really nice to her and helping her family, which obviously couldn't afford nice things. The next one in tier 3, the victim doesn't have a name. You guys might have seen this footage before. Back in November 2019, there is Ring doorbell security footage of this person allegedly being kidnapped. On the footage, there's this car driving by through this neighborhood, and you can hear this woman from the car just screaming at the top of her lungs for somebody to help her, like that she is in danger and that she needs help. The scariest thing about this footage is that we still don't know who this is to this day. This case has not been solved. We've never been able to identify the woman. We don't know if she's okay. We don't know if she's just some missing person now. And we have no idea if the person's ever been caught or what happened to her. The next one in tier 3 is a Tulane student that survives a mugging because the gun jams. Back in November of 2015 in New Orleans, there's this mugger that is trying to drag this woman down the street and towards his car like he's going to kidnap her. She falls and he ends up taking her purse. 25-year-old Peter Gold intervenes and he stops to try and help the woman. But this enrages the mugger and he turns on Peter instead. The mugger had apparently shot Peter Gold in the stomach because Peter Gold said that he didn't have any money for the mugger to take. So he shoots him in the stomach and Peter Gold is sitting there like writhing in pain. And then the mugger goes for Peter's head and he's definitely going to shoot Peter in the head. He tries and the gun miraculously jams and he's not shot in the head at all. The mugger tries again and again. The gun jams, so the mugger gives up and runs away. Peter is then taken to the hospital and he survived the shooting. The woman thankfully only sustained minor injuries. The mugger only ran off with her purse, and since he was dragging her towards a vehicle, it's quite possible that Peter Gold saved her life, because it seemed to me like he was about to kidnap her and do God knows what, and he intervened and she was able to stay out of his car. Next in tier 3 is a woman named Emma Phillips. Philippoff. A 26-year-old Canadian woman named Emma Philippoff disappeared in front of an Empress Hotel in British Columbia on November 28, 2012. She had been staying at a women's homeless shelter on and off since February of that year, even though her family was totally unaware of this. 5 days before her disappearance, there's CCTV of her in a YMCA. She walks in and out of the building several times, and it almost looks like she's looking out the window to peer out on the street to see if somebody's following her or like she's looking for somebody. And then early on the actual day of her disappearance, there's also CCTV of her in a gas station store. Again, she's looking out the window outside as if somebody's following her. She does leave the store briefly, and then she returns and proceeds to purchase a $200 prepaid credit card. She returned to the shelter, and then she leaves the shelter again at 6 p.m. that day. She started taking a taxi, apparently to the airport, but we don't know where she was going. And the taxi actually dropped her off way early because she didn't have the amount of money needed to pay the fare. And for some reason that we don't know, she didn't use her $200 credit card. Minutes after that, she's seen walking barefoot in front of the Empress Hotel where she would disappear. She was acting really erratically, so somebody eventually calls 911 on her. The police come and talk to her, but they don't think that she's any sort of threat, and so they leave and they let her go. And that's it. That's pretty much the last time that she was ever seen. There's been no confirmed sightings since this happened. That's one of those missing person cases where it's just like, poof, no clues, no nothing. She's just there 1 minute and gone the next. Next is the Jameson family footage. Bobby and Sherilyn Jameson, along with their 6-year-old daughter Madison, went missing on October 8th, 2009 in Oklahoma. The family had been planning to move, so they packed all of their stuff up in the car and they got going, assumably, to move. And then they were just not seen alive again. They just disappeared. 4 years later, in 2013, the family's skeletal remains were found. At the time of their actual disappearance, they did find their vehicle, and they had found $32,000 in cash and all of their belongings in the vehicle. The creepy part is that there's surveillance footage from their house, and we can see the family packing up, going to and from the house to their car, packing up the stuff to move. And this is the last confirmed sighting that we've seen of them alive. A lot of people say that in the footage they look disoriented and look like they're acting really weird, but it's hard to tell because this is kind of still footage. It's not a continuous video. It's just, stills every few seconds. But again, that's it. Nobody knows to this day what happened to them other than the fact that their remains were found, so we know that they had passed away. Next is Jessica Chambers. On December 6, 2014, 19-year-old Jessica Chambers was found on fire next to her car, which was also on fire. Gasoline had been poured down her throat, all over her body, and up her nose. She died early the next morning in the hospital. Authorities say that she said the name Eric or Derek as she was being helped on the side of the road. There is CCTV footage of Jessica throughout the day coming in and out of an M&M gas station nearby. This was just hours before she was murdered. It gave lots of clues, but it didn't ever explain exactly what happened to Jessica. This case is technically still unsolved. So this is one of those cases that's not technically solved, but they really do know who did it. A man named Quentin Tellis had been in contact with Jessica for weeks before her death. They were reportedly romantically involved, but he had been badgering her for sex like a ton, and she had kept refusing. When they questioned him, though, a lot of it just lined up. He kept changing his story over and over. His DNA were found on Jessica's car keys. The two had been texting like nonstop on weeks before she died, and then the second she died, he completely stopped contacting her and he didn't text her again right after she died. Not only that, but it was found that he deleted a bunch of messages from her like an hour after she died. Luckily, even though this isn't solved and they didn't have enough evidence against him, he is still in jail for another murder of a different woman. The theory is that Jessica and Quentin had met up that day. He again pestered her for sex, and when she declined, he got really angry. He likely at that point point assaulted her and then strangled her until she was unconscious. He then drove her away since they were at his house in her car, so that would be obviously him committing the crime. So he drove her to a different location. He then walked on foot to his sister's house, which was nearby, to borrow her car. He took her car to go get gasoline. He went back to the site where Jessica was still unconscious and then proceeded to light her and her car, all the evidence, on fire. To explain the Eric or Derek thing when she said that as she was on the street dying, a lot of people believe that this is possibly because Quentin's sister, maybe she went with him to the site to help him carry out this crime, and she has the name Eric tattooed on her hand. So it's thought that maybe she was there or she was involved somehow and she saw that name before she died. But again, this is not solved, and that's not enough evidence to put somebody away or convict them. Quentin almost definitely had something to do with this, but we don't know for sure that he is responsible or solely responsible. Last in tier 3 is the murder of Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Smith was 18 years old and she was last seen on June 7th, 2007. She went into a Target in Kansas to buy a present for her boyfriend. She apparently spoke with her mother on the phone while she was in the store. She then paid for her items and left the store, never to be seen alive again. Surveillance footage from Target shows her enter, shop, and leave the store. But in that same footage with her, they also have this man going into every aisle that she went into, but clearly keeping a safe distance from her, but obviously following her. He also left the store then shortly before Kelsey did. They also have footage of somebody in the parking lot forcing Kelsey into her own car. The car was left in front of a nearby Macy's parking lot about 2 hours later with all of Kelsey's belongings left inside of it. The same man that was stalking her in Target can be seen getting out of the car and running towards the street. They found Kelsey's body a few days later, 18 to 20 miles away from where she had been abducted, all the way in Missouri, even though she had been abducted in Kansas. She had, of course, also been sexually assaulted, and the way she died was strangulation. Thankfully, this one is solved, and they did catch her killer. Edwin Roy Jack Hall is a 26-year-old male who was identified by one of his neighbors who saw him on the surveillance tape soon after this happened. He had a wife and a 4-year-old child. Thankfully, he was sentenced to prison without the possibility of parole. Let's move on to tier 4. On October 31st, 2013 in Ontario, Canada, a 32-year-old inmate named Anthony George beats his cellmate, 29-year-old Adam Cargis, to death right in their cell. The beating can be seen in the distance on camera, and then he can also be seen on camera dragging his cellmate's body the next morning to the shower area. The guards never noticed while this was happening. Anthony was apparently drunk on jailhouse alcohol at the time of the murder. He also admitted to smoking a cigarette that was laced with PCP at the time, but I have no idea how he would have gotten that. The whole attack against his cellmate lasted an entire hour. Some of the inmates that saw, some of them were cheering him on and encouraging him, while others were trying to alert the guards. The guards, though, still did nothing. 6 staff members at the jail were fired as a result of not doing anything. And then 2 other inmates also got in trouble because they basically helped Anthony move the body from point A to point B. And they also helped him clean up the blood in his cell. So this would be one thing, but Anthony was known to be violent, and he had previous instances with his cellmate. Like, he had at least put him in a chokehold before, amongst other things. The guards just didn't notice. They should have been paying more attention, especially when that kind of thing happened. Right there. They were right there. Crazy. Next is Joseph Merlino III. His story is also in my Disturbing Things That Happen to Real People episode 1, so the full details I've already gone over in there if you want to watch that video. Overview. On February 14th, 2017, Joseph Merlino III waits for his ex to arrive home from work and attacks her out of nowhere with a needle, injecting her with a lethal dose of cyanide. The attack is caught on her security camera. She had shared a 2-year-old baby with Joseph. Her parents, of course, rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately she passed away the next day. She had installed that security camera specifically because she feared Joseph. He thankfully also got life in prison for this crime. Next is Relisha Rudd. In 2014, 8-year-old Relisha was living with her mother, Samika Young, at a shelter for people experiencing poverty and homelessness. They were befriended by a janitor at the shelter, 51-year-old Khalil Tatum. He had had previous felonies and spent time in jail and was known for just being like generally creepy in the shelter, especially towards young underage girls. But he gained their trust. He bought Relisha a tablet and he also took her to Disney on Ice. Mom actually then let Relisha stay overnight with this man one night, but he had told her that it was going to be with him and his grandmother. Right after that, Relisha suddenly disappeared from school. She stopped going to school sometime in February of that year, and weirdly enough, Relisha's mom tried to cover it up. Mom wrote a note to the school saying that Relisha was being cared for by somebody named Dr. Tatum. When the school couldn't get in contact with Dr. Tatum, they called the authorities to report her missing. This was on March 19th, so weeks after Relisha disappeared. So there's a couple videos on the hotel surveillance of Tatum walking Relisha through the hallways. On February 26th at the Holiday Inn, and again on March 1st at the Days Inn, the last time she's seen. So we know that he took her, but we don't know exactly what he did to her. But we can assume she probably died around this date. So jump again to March 19th when Relisha is reported missing by the school. They also find Tatum's wife, Andrea, shot in the head in a motel room. Tatum was last seen buying lime, a shovel, and large trash bags. They were, of course, going to arrest him, but they found him dead as well, apparently from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Relisha is presumed to be dead, but she's never been found. This case also got barely any coverage outside of the local DC area, which again just shows you that Black children going missing are just not given as much media attention, especially impoverished Black children. Next, we have Noreen Jaslin. In August of 2007, an 8-year-old Malaysian girl named Noreen Jaslin went to a wet market to buy a hair clip, and she never returned home. Her case is still not solved. A brand new gym bag, though, was just found in front of a shop. The shop owner discovered the bag, and when he opened it, he discovered that her body was inside. Clearly, she had been severely tortured, and she was probably dead for about 6 hours and had been in that bag for at least 6 hours dead. The CCTV footage is of some man on a motorcycle where they see him dropping off the bag. And then a little while later in the CCTV camera, we also see this woman who gets into a van with a couple of guys, and they're acting a little weird and loitering around. We can kind of assume that they might have had something to do with it, the people on the CCTV, but of course we don't know. Her case, again, has still not been solved. Next is a woman named Magdalena Zook. On April 25th, 2017, Magdalena went to the Red Sea Resort in Egypt. She was a 27-year-old Polish tourist. For unknown reasons, she was planning to fly home early, but she was acting so strangely and erratically at the airport that security basically had to take her, and they took her to a hospital to be examined instead. There's CCTV footage of her acting really strangely at the hospital and also apparently being restrained by two men. She had apparently tried to jump out of the window several times at the hospital, and it got to the point where they had to tie her to the bed. She managed to escape the ties by tricking a nurse into letting her go under the pretense that she had to use the restroom. She attacked the nurse instead and proceeded to jump out of the window of the hospital where she died. Egyptian authorities to this day maintain that she died from suicide and that she did this on purpose. So what do you think happened? Did she just have a psychotic break and she did in fact die from suicide? Was she just trying to escape in general and didn't realize how high up she was? Was she possibly on drugs? Did somebody sexually assault her and like somebody was trying to traffic her and so she was trying to get away from that? Maybe it caused panic and also a mental break. Though we know she passed away and we know how she passed away and the circumstances around it, there's still a lot of questions in this case and some of it that is unsolved. Brendan Volmost. On March 31st, 2015, 23-year-old Brandon is seen on camera jumping out of his friend's car and being chased into his backyard by 4 men who had followed him home in a white station wagon. What we don't see in the footage is that the 4 men beat him severely in the backyard off camera. They then carry his limp body a few minutes later, put it in the car, and drive away. The 4 assailants then later claimed that Brandon pulled a gun on them in the backyard, and so they beat him because it was self-defense. Definitely self-defense. They beat him until he almost died, and then put his body in a car, and then drove away with it. Anyway, the 4 got charged for manslaughter and for hiding a body. I can't find any other information on their conviction though, or why they got such a light sentence for such a severe crime. The most disturbing part is that we have his last moments on CCTV footage, but nobody has found Brendan's body to this day. Kaylin Louder. Kaylin Louder was last seen on surveillance video leaving her condo without shoes, money, her phone, or an umbrella in the pouring rain on September 27th, 2014. She then went missing. It wasn't until about 9 weeks later they finally found her body 5 miles away from where she disappeared. She was only 30 years old. Even more weirdly, she had apparently made phone calls to 911 reporting crimes that never happened. It was probably because she was having some sort of delusions and hallucinations. She was also going through some sort of depression due to her employment status, but other than that, she had never had any other mental health struggles. In the footage, it looks like she's talking really excitedly, but a lot of people think that maybe she's just enthusiastically talking to her dog, which doesn't surprise me at all. Like, I talk to my dog really enthusiastically, so I don't know if she's being odd in this footage. I think she could just be doing that, but we don't know. The dog, by the way, was later found unharmed. But even though we know she passed away, it's still totally unknown what happened to her from when she went missing to when they found her body. Okay, we are now finally on tier 5, the last and deepest tier in this iceberg. The first one in tier 5 is the crossbow cannibal. In Bradford, West Yorkshire, England, during 2009 and 2010, 3 women were killed. 43-year-old Susan Rushworth, 31-year-old Shelley Armitage, and 36-year-old Suzanne Blameyers. All 3 of these women had been sex workers. A man named Stephen Griffiths was convicted of killing all 3 women, although Stephen called himself the crossbow cannibal. So he gave himself his own little nickname, which, what a loser. Like, I also don't need to explain why he called himself that. It's extremely straightforward. I'll let you fill in the blanks. And of course, the other really sad part about this is that those 3 women were probably not his only victims. He highly likely had a lot more, and that he was a pretty active serial killer. Stephen apparently pretty much always aspired to be a serial killer from a very young age, and it's like what he always wanted to do. I bet he came up with that stupid nickname for himself when he was way younger and was was just waiting to use it and hope everybody would call him that. Anyway, when he kidnapped and killed his last known victim, Suzanne Bleymeyers, he actually held her at his flat for 2 days before killing her. So she actually got away at one point and she tried to make a run for it. But we can see on CCTV footage in the flat in the building that he catches her and he drags her back into his apartment and then kills her, which is just so much worse because she was so close and she almost got away. The CCTV footage you're about to see is Steven knowing he's on camera and flipping off the camera as he's about to carry out this crime. Next is the Tatanagar railway station abduction. In July of 2019, Rinku Sahu, 35, Manhu Mandal, 28, and Kailash Kumar, 38, were all convicted of the extremely brutal sexual assault and murder of a 3-year-old girl. The 3-year-old girl can be seen on CCTV sleeping with her mother in the Tatanagar railway station in India. When you see on the CCTV 2 men just picking her up and walking away with the little girl. Turns out the man that you see sleeping right next to her mom is Manu Mandel, her boyfriend. Apparently he conspired with the 2 men because he wanted the mom for himself, so he conspired with them to kill the little girl so she was no longer in the picture. The main perpetrator, Rinku Sahu, did get life in prison. Manu only got 10 years and Kailash only got 7 years. All 3 of them also got fines. However, this seems really lenient to me. I'm not sure why only one of them got life in prison. Like, I know he was the main person, but all 3 should have gotten life in prison because all 3 of them are the reason that that little girl is dead. This is one of those cases though that I really recommend you don't look up the details because it'll ruin your life. Next on tier 5, our deepest tier, is Lisa and James Goy. On February 1st, 2021 of this year, James and Lisa Goy's murders were caught on home security camera. James and Lisa Goy had never had a great relationship with their neighbor, Jeffrey Spade. And from what I gather, they were actually huge assholes to him. On this particular morning, on the morning that they died, they were shoveling snow from their yard and deliberately shoveling it into Jeffrey's yard, literally just to be assholes. Though they were legitimate assholes to their neighbor, it still doesn't justify what happens next. They get in a verbal altercation. Jeffrey does threaten to kill the couple, and the couple does egg him on. Like, they totally say, you know, like, you don't have the balls and you're not gonna do that and yada yada yada. I'm pretty sure they didn't actually believe that he was gonna do what he was about to do. Jeffrey disappears into his house. All of this is on CCTV footage. He disappears into the house and returns with a gun. He then shoots them both until they're dead. It's especially horrible because he shoots the wife and then the husband runs away to try to get into the house to call for help. So you don't see his death on camera, but he follows him and shoots him. And then the wife is not dead and he goes back and you see him continue to shoot her until she is dead. This video is extremely graphic and I'm not going to show it on YouTube because I would, you know, but I will show some clips of before the violent parts and some parts that I can show.
Push, push. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
After the 2 are dead, Jeffrey then retreats into his own home and very quickly then shoots himself and he dies before police arrive. This is definitely one of the most graphic videos I have ever seen in my life and still just like deeply disturbs me. I definitely think this deserves tier 5 for sure because it is just the most upsetting thing. It's so creepy. I can't, such a stupid thing for 3 people to die over, and a really angry man coupled with people that were really encouraging him to do this. Again, not that that justifies their death or anything. They still didn't deserve to die no matter how much of assholes they were, but this one upsets me. I think about it sometimes. Second to last in our iceberg is Shania Davis. There's no video for this one. There's only stills from the CCTV footage, but I did have to include it because this is also just one of the worst you'll ever hear. Shania Davis was only 5 years old when her mother, Antoinette Nicole Davis, gave her to a man named Mario Andret McNeil to settle a $200 debt that she owed him. He demanded that she either give him the money or give him sex. So mom apparently then just handed over her daughter knowing that her 5-year-old was gonna be raped. There is chilling CCTV footage of Mario carrying Shania into his hotel room right before this all goes down. Her body was then found on the side of the road. She was, of course, sexually assaulted and murdered. Mario is currently on death row for his crimes. Shania's mom is only serving 17.5 years for what she did and her part in this. She's expected to be released from prison in 2027. How is this not just as much her fault? She knew what was gonna happen and she did it. She literally said that her daughter's life is worth $200 to her. Oy, I'm sorry, you guys are probably all sad. But luckily, we only have one more left. The last one is Fiona Anderson. In April of 2013, 23-year-old Fiona Anderson is seen on CCTV leaving her ex's home. Her 3 children, Lavina, who was 3 years old, Addie, 2 years old, and Kaiden, 11 months old, were all found dead in the home. Fiona had drowned all 3 of the children in the bath. She left lipstick kiss marks on each of their heads, wrote "I love you X" on their stomachs, and also wrote other notes all over the walls around them. After this, she was also seen on CCTV wandering the streets with a teddy bear in her hand. Shortly after this, she goes to the top of a building and jumps to her death. A 5th person died in this scenario because it turns out that she was also 7 months pregnant. It's thought that she did all this because she was so upset that her ex told her that he had a new girlfriend. Of course, I'm sure she had some mental illness that she was struggling with, but either way, she murdered all of her children. The CCTV footage is just so chilling though, because she almost looks like a ghost that she's wandering around almost absently, having done all these things. That's it. That's the whole iceberg. Y'all gotta tell me if you have others. I know that this is all crime and not like creepy ghost footage, just because I wanted to keep it all in one category. Again, you guys, if you have any information about any of the unsolved cases that I went over, either in part 1 or part 2, please reach out to me via email and I will help you get in contact with the proper authorities on that case. If you made it to this point, you might as well please like the video just to help my channel out. And if you enjoyed these type of videos, I make more videos on creepy and disturbing things, so please subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it through both parts 1 and 2, and I will see you guys all in the next video.